The stars above the outer rim of the Sol system flickered like they always had. But that night something felt wrong, the kind of wrong that makes even the cold of space seem alive. Alien patrol stations orbiting the dark edges of human territory picked up an anomaly first. It wasn't a sound or a signal, it was a shadow, a massive, moving shape that slid between the stars, like a curtain being pulled across the sky. At first the alien operators laughed, calling it a glitch. Their scanners had never seen anything so big and so silent. They reset systems, recalibrated, waited for the shape to vanish. But it didn't. It only grew bigger and darker, like something ancient rising from the deep. The void was silent, but the silence was heavy, the kind that made every heartbeat feel too loud. Across 3 different alien stations, identical reports came in. Unidentified mass approaching Sol perimeter. They repeated the line again and again, like a broken record. No one believed the humans could build anything like this. Humanity was known for small, fast ships, nothing grand, nothing powerful, nothing terrifying. But what was drifting through the black wasn't small. It wasn't fast, it wasn't loud, it was massive. Deliberate and silent. In the central patrol cruiser, an alien captain leaned closer to the screen, his mandibles tight, his crew whispering behind him. "How big is it?" unasked. But the answer didn't come. The number on the scanner climbed too high for their scale to read. The ship didn't match any known registry. No signal, no ID, no light. Just a slow pulse echoing through deep space like a heartbeat from something alive. Back on the Council monitoring station, the alert went out like a cold wind through the halls. Diplomats and commanders gathered in a room filled with floating star maps, blue lights flashing across the walls. "It's coming from human territory," someone said with a laugh. "Impossible," another answered, shaking his head, but the data didn't lie. The readings were too stable to be a sensor ghost, too slow to be debris, too precise to be an accident. Someone somewhere had launched it. While they argued, the shadow crossed another sector, and entire clusters of satellites blinked out as if swallowed whole. The technicians tried to restore connection, but the signal was gone, not jammed, not destroyed, simply gone. In deep orbit, alien scout ships began to scatter, their pilots muttering to each other in shaky voices. "It's not a fleet. It's one ship," they said. But the size was wrong. No single vessel could be that big. It would need fuel, support, a visible heat signature, but there was nothing. It moved like a ghost. The captain of one scout ship decided to move closer, breaking formation, engines humming in the dark. As the nose of his craft turned toward the shape, the stars behind it disappeared completely, swallowed by something so huge that his own systems began to lag. Alarms screamed through his cabin, but he didn't stop. He wanted to see it, to prove it was just a trick of light. But when the black outline came into view, his breath froze. It wasn't a station. It wasn't an asteroid. It was a hull, black and smooth, longer than any dreadnought ever built. Its edges wrapped in layers of what looked like armor plates the size of cities, and in its center, an oval opening began to glow with a soft white light like an eye opening in the dark. The pilot whispered, "What is this?" But before he could finish, his comms cut out. Across the galaxy, the Council Hall's giant display showed a single flickering signal, one long, slow transmission from human space. A human voice, calm and steady, spoke only 3 words. "This is Terra," and then everything went quiet. No one laughed now. Commanders leaned closer to their consoles. Diplomats stared at the screen with wide, unsure eyes. The silence stretched across star systems, thick and uncomfortable, like the moment before a storm. For years, the galaxy had mocked Earth, calling them loud, fragile, unpredictable, a young race playing in the dark. But now that same young race had sent something into the void that made even seasoned war fleets feel small. The alien captain who had first approached tried to turn back, but his ship barely moved. Their engines screamed. Their systems blinked red, and then the object emitted a low, almost gentle hum, not like a weapon, But like the sound of a sleeping beast taking its first breath, the captain's crew froze, staring at their screens as their radar filled with a single word, unknown. The ship didn't fire. It didn't speak again. It only drifted closer to the border, and the stars behind it vanished, as if the night itself was moving. Council defense lines scrambled. Fleets began to reposition. Admirals barked orders. But nothing seemed enough. It was too late to prepare, too late to mock, too late to pretend Earth was harmless. Inside hidden bunkers across human colonies, officers stared at their own screens in silence, their faces unreadable. They had known this day would come, and now the galaxy was seeing what Earth had built in silence. The first 5 minutes of that shadow's arrival would be spoken about for centuries, not because of an attack, but because of the fear it created without firing a single shot. In that moment, the galaxy didn't see a weak planet anymore. It saw a storm rising from the quiet edges of Sol, something too big to ignore and too late to stop. And as the shadow kept moving, its lights slowly turning on one by one, like a giant waking up from a long sleep. Everyone watching felt the same cold truth crawl up their spine. Earth had never been loud, it had been silent, and silence was always the most dangerous sound. In the Galactic Council chamber, the laughter echoed like a storm. Generals leaned back in their chairs. Diplomats smirked, and analysts waved off the warning reports like they were nothing but children's stories. A few hours earlier, every scanner on the edge of human space had caught the same signal, an object too big to be a ship and too silent to be a station. But here, inside the tall golden walls of the council chamber, no one believed it. Humans can barely hold their colonies together, one alien general scoffed, his voice dripping with arrogance. A warship of that size? A child's fantasy. The chamber roared with laughter. The alien admiral of the Northern Arm Fleet tapped on the glowing map in front of him, zooming in on the slowly moving shape. "Their bluff is almost cute," he said. "They want us to believe they have something that big. Let them have their fun. It's probably a mining platform they forgot to dismantle." But while their voices filled the chamber, the map on the wall kept shifting. The object kept growing, and the data stayed steady, never glitching, never fading. A few quiet officers sitting in the back whispered to one another. One of them, an older strategist, stared at the readings in silence, his face pale. He had seen something like this only once before, back during the First Rift War, when an entire fleet vanished under the shadow of a single structure. He whispered, "This isn't a trick," but no one heard him. They were too busy mocking humanity. The council speaker, sitting on a high platform above the others, raised his hands for silence. "Let us not panic," he said with a thin smile. "The humans love drama. This is a performance, nothing more." His voice carried weight, but his eyes flicked nervously toward the screen. He saw the numbers too. Even the great fleets of the Central Alliance couldn't build something that big without half the galaxy noticing. Yet somehow, Earth had done something that no one had predicted. On the lower deck, analysts worked feverishly, trying to match the readings with known blueprints. Their systems returned nothing. No registry, no class, no design, just one line flashing red across every terminal, unidentified, massive object. An ambassador from the insectoid colonies slammed his claw against the table. "We should send scouts," he hissed. "Show them their little toy doesn't scare us." Others nodded in agreement. Arrogance made them brave. Pride made them blind. A fleet commander stood up, his long cloak dragging across the polished floor. "Let us remind Earth that the Council does not tremble before noise," he said, and the chamber roared again. But while they spoke like conquerors, their fleets were already repositioning quietly. One by one, warships began to drift towards Sol's border. Not because they believed the threat, but because somewhere deep inside, their instincts whispered that something wasn't right. At the same time, on one of the side balconies, a small group of intelligence officers huddled around a projection. They had stripped the data raw, removing council filters and diplomatic layers, and what they saw made their hands go cold. The shape wasn't irregular. It wasn't drifting. It was structured. symmetrical, engine lines hidden beneath heat-masking technology. No race in the Council, not even the oldest empires, had tech that could mask a ship this size. And yet Earth had. One of them whispered, "They've been hiding this." Another replied, "For how long?" The council speaker continued his speech about human noise and weakness, but no one was laughing as hard anymore. Some sat quietly, watching the red dots slowly moving across the holomap. It wasn't slowing down. It wasn't changing direction. It was coming straight toward them. And then another report arrived. Then another. More stations at the border of human space confirmed identical readings. The shadow wasn't alone. Smaller signals followed in its wake. Escort ships, or maybe something worse. A nervous admiral leaned toward his comlink. "How did we miss this?" he whispered to his aide. The aide didn't answer, because the truth was simple. Earth had never been under their watch the way they thought. For decades, humanity had played the part of the loud, fragile species. They fought petty wars, traded loudly, argued in council meetings, all while building something the galaxy thought impossible. They had hidden a monster in the dark. The council chamber grew quieter. A single alert tone rang from the command table, a warning from the front lines. "Scout ship Beta 9 lost contact," the voice said flatly. "No distress beacon, no signal, nothing." Every eye in the chamber turned toward the map. The shadow had just swallowed another ship. A fleet admiral stood slowly, his smile gone. "This isn't a bluff," he said. The council speaker's smile faltered for the first time. The laughter stopped completely. In its place came silence, thick and cold. The pride that had filled the room just moments ago began to slip away, replaced by something they had never felt when dealing with Earth. Uncertainty. The alien admiral who had mocked them clenched his jaw. He remembered the stories told about humanity, their stubbornness, their silence before striking. And now that silence had shape, a shape big enough to block out the stars. In that chamber, surrounded by their shining banners and gold walls, the mighty council finally understood that something was moving in the dark, something they had ignored for too long. They had laughed at Earth, now they were afraid to blink. And as the shadow advanced, their war fleets turned toward Sol not with arrogance anymore, but with caution, because deep down they knew the galaxy had just woken something it could not control. The alien patrol fleet glided through the silent void like silver knives slicing through water, confident, fast, and proud, their engines humming with that careless kind of arrogance that only comes from believing you're untouchable. Their commanders still thought the shadow was just a human trick, some oversized decoy meant to scare the weak. They didn't know that every light flickering on their screens was a warning they wouldn't understand until it was too late. The lead cruiser adjusted its heading and slipped into position at the edge of the Sol perimeter. Scanners ready, weapons on standby but not armed. Because in their minds there was no real threat. No warship could ever be that large, not from Earth. Not from the species they called loud children of the void. The captain of the lead ship leaned back in his chair, mandibles clicking in amusement as the data scrolled across his screen. His crew laughed nervously, some even placing small bets on what the shadow would turn out to be: a broken station, an abandoned ship, maybe even a debris field. But not one of them guessed the truth. As they moved closer, their scanners started to stutter. Long-range readings blurred into static. The numbers spiked, then fell, then spiked again, like the machines themselves were scared. The navigator tapped the console, trying to stabilize the feed. But the more they tried, the worse it got. And then the stars disappeared. 1 second, the fleet floated under a clear map of the galaxy. The next, it was as if a curtain had been pulled down over everything. Blackness swallowed the horizon. Their navigation lights reflected off something so vast, it filled the entire front view of their screens. The crew stopped laughing. The captain stood up slowly, his antenna twitching as his voice turned low and sharp. "Bring me visuals," he ordered. And when the image appeared, even he stopped breathing. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't a broken station. It wasn't even close to anything the galaxy had ever built. The structure ahead of them was a warship so massive it stretched beyond their visual frame, its hull made of black metal that reflected no light. its armor curved and layered like the skin of a sleeping beast, and in the center of it, one narrow line of light slid open like an eye. The smallest ships in the patrol were so tiny compared to it, they looked like insects floating near a mountain, and for the first time, the alien captain felt something he had never felt when facing humans. Real fear. He whispered, How did they build this? The communications officer tried to send a report back to the council, but the signal didn't move. It bounced back, like the massive ship in front of them was swallowing every transmission whole. The engines on the smaller ships began to shake as the object emitted a low, steady pulse, not a weapon blast, not a threat, just a deep, humming sound that vibrated through their hulls like the growl of something alive. Their systems flickered, their shields went offline one by one, and one of the smaller patrol ships simply vanished. Its lights blinked out like a candle in the wind. No explosion, no debris, just gone. The captain screamed for reverse engines, but they didn't respond fast enough. The fleet spun and twisted like leaves in a storm as the Leviathan's presence bent everything around it. A small shockwave rolled through the patrol and knocked several ships out of formation. Their alarms screamed, but no sound reached beyond their own cabins. The humans hadn't fired a single shot, yet entire ships were falling apart. The captain slammed his claw against the console, shouting to break free. But then the voice came again, the same calm, steady human voice that had echoed through the stars earlier. "This is terror," it said, nothing more, nothing less. And every ship in the patrol froze as the sound vibrated through the void, like a hand pressing against their chest. On one of the smaller ships, a young alien pilot stared at the Leviathan through the cracked glass of his viewport, its hull slowly lighting up section by section, lines of bright blue and white snaking across its surface like veins under skin. No fleet in the galaxy had ever used this kind of energy signature. No one had ever seen anything like it. He whispered to himself, "This isn't a ship. It's a world." His hands trembled as he pushed the controls, but their engines refused to respond. The closer they were, the more it felt like gravity itself belonged to the monster in front of them. The captain managed to broadcast a final message to the council, a single line before the comms collapsed. "It's real," he said, his voice low and shaking. "And it's awake." Far away in the council's war room, the signal cut into static and vanished. The diplomats who had laughed an hour ago now leaned over the screens with cold faces. The generals who mocked Earth exchanged nervous glances. They didn't understand how the humans had done it. They only understood what the data was screaming. The patrol fleet had vanished without a trace. In the silence that followed, one strategist whispered, "No one builds a ship like that for defense." And as the Leviathan drifted forward, silent and unstoppable, the galaxy finally realized this was not a bluff, not a trick, not a desperate show. This was power, real terrifying, ancient-feeling power. Earth had never needed to roar. It had only needed to wait. And now the waiting was over. Beneath the frozen surface of Europa, deep under layers of shifting ice, there was a place no one in the galaxy had ever seen. Not even Earth's closest allies, a place built in silence, buried in cold, hidden from every satellite and council eye. While the galaxy argued, mocked and dismissed, humanity had been building something no one dared imagine. The project didn't have a name the world knew, only whispers in classified files, a myth inside a myth. The kind of story even Earth's own soldiers thought was a legend. But down in the dark beneath the ice, it had been real all along. Massive hangars stretched for miles, their ceilings glowing with artificial light like a hidden sun. Engineers in black suits moved like ghosts, their voices low, their movements sharp. They had spent decades preparing for one moment, the moment the galaxy would push too far. On the main command bridge, under layers of reinforced steel, a single red light turned green, and a voice echoed through the station, calm and steady. "Project Leviathan. Authorization confirmed." The engineers didn't cheer. They didn't celebrate. They had trained too long for this. They moved with perfect discipline, switching on systems that hadn't been touched for years. Ancient generators rumbled to life. Machines that had slept in silence awakened with deep metallic groans. Massive doors slowly unsealed with a roar that vibrated through the frozen crust above. The sound was like the breath of a monster rising from hibernation. Above them, the ice cracked but didn't break. The structure had been designed to move without revealing itself, a miracle of hidden engineering. The kind of precision the galaxy thought humanity couldn't achieve. But Earth had achieved it, quietly. While the Council mocked them for being loud and chaotic, they had learned to be silent. In the control room, a woman with silver hair and a scar down her face placed her hand on a black console. The machine scanned her palm, and the screen lit up with a single word, Leviathan. Behind her, rows of officers stood at attention, their faces calm, their eyes steady. They weren't surprised. They had known this day would come. They had watched the Council ignore every warning, every treaty broken, every insult thrown, and they had waited. "All systems active," one of the engineers whispered. "Reactor is stable, thrusters locked." Slowly, the ground beneath their feet began to shake. A hidden cradle buried for decades was opening, and in it rested something that made everything else humanity had ever built look like toys. The ship wasn't just large, it was alive with design. Its black hull forged from alloys no alien nation had ever discovered. Its edges smooth like the surface of a blade. Its armor fused with gravitational fields so heavy they bent sensor readings. Rows of rail cannons and energy turrets lined its flanks like the ribs of a predator. And at its heart, buried under the layers of steel, pulsed a reactor that hummed like a heartbeat. The Leviathan wasn't just a ship. It was a message, a reminder to the galaxy that silence did not mean weakness. Humanity had built it not in orbit, not on a shipyard, but under the ice, where no one looked. As the activation sequence continued, hundreds of smaller hangar doors opened along the underbelly of the base, releasing escort drones, defense turrets, and AI-guided craft, each one falling into formation like pieces of a machine older than anyone knew. A massive steel arm detached the ship from its anchor, and the ocean beneath the ice boiled as the Leviathan began to rise. The weight of the ship cracked the frozen crust like a god forcing its way to the surface. For the first time in history, the Council's scanners caught a direct reading of its hull, and what they saw terrified them. A heat signature unlike anything recorded. Power readings that broke every known scale. The words flashing across their tactical boards were the same on every ship. Unknown, unmatched, unstoppable. On Earth's encrypted communication network, a single transmission was sent to every military outpost. A line that had been written years ago for one moment only. "We asked for peace," the message said, "but we built for war." While the galaxy had shown its strength in loud parades and glowing fleets, Earth had built something so quiet, so hidden, that it had become a myth even to their enemies. Now the myth was rising from the deep. Massive thrusters ignited under the frozen surface, melting entire chunks of ice as the Leviathan broke through like a black titan, steam and water exploding into the void. And for a heartbeat, everything went still. Then it moved, slowly, powerfully, as if the stars themselves had shifted. Inside the ship, bridges lit up, systems came alive. Crew members stepped into their stations, faces calm, no panic, no chaos. Only the cold focus of people who had been preparing their entire lives for this day. The captain walked across the command deck, the glow of the control panels reflecting in her eyes, and whispered, "No more hiding!" The Leviathan's engines roared once, and the sound rolled through the void like a wave. Every listening post in the galaxy heard it, a single pulse that carried a message clearer than any broadcast. While the Council scrambled to position their fleets, they didn't know the truth. The Leviathan wasn't being built to start a war. It was built to end one before it began. Humanity had hidden its strength not to conquer, but to make sure no one ever tried to crush them again. And as the warship broke orbit, shadows followed behind it, escort ships sliding into formation like soldiers surrounding a king. The galaxy had always thought Earth was the weak one in the room. But the weak do not build monsters in silence. The weak do not wait with patience. The weak do not rise from beneath the ice like this. The weak are not Leviathan. When the Leviathan broke orbit, the stars themselves seemed to flinch. Its engines burned with a slow, deep light. The kind that didn't flash or flare like other ships, but moved like a tide, quiet, patient, unstoppable. It drifted into open space without sending warnings or declarations. Yet every sensor in the galaxy screamed its name, even when no one spoke it aloud. The patrol fleet stationed at the outer rim felt it first. Their scanners went white, their communications lagged, and the space around them shook with a pressure none of their ships could match. They had prepared for war before, but this was something different. This was a storm without sound. As the Leviathan passed through the edge of Sol, hundreds of small outposts blinked out in silence, not destroyed, just erased from the network as if the void itself had swallowed them. The ship didn't fire a single shot. It didn't need to. Its presence was enough to make entire fleets retreat, their captains yelling over broken comms. "It's too big. Our weapons won't lock. We can't track it." Back in the Galactic Council's central war room, the atmosphere had changed from mockery to panic. Admirals who had once laughed now leaned forward, their faces tight, their voices low. One of them slammed his fist into the table. "It shouldn't be moving this fast," he barked. "Nothing that size moves like that." But Leviathan did, cutting through the void with the weight of a world. The Council ordered their first response fleet into position, 140 warships, armed with the best the galaxy had ever produced. Cruisers, carriers, heavy destroyers, all forming a perfect battle wall at the edge of the central trade corridor. It was supposed to be enough to stop anything. But when the Leviathan appeared out of the dark, their formation looked like ants forming a line in front of a mountain. The alien fleet commanders barked orders. Their weapons warmed, shields flared, but nothing happened to the Leviathan. Their targeting systems jittered like they were trying to aim at a shadow. Scanners couldn't get a full lock. Every time they did, the readings broke. Its hull bent every signal around it like space itself didn't want to reveal what it really was. And then for a long minute, the galaxy watched a war without a single shot fired. The Leviathan stood alone, facing the largest fleet ever assembled, its black hull glowing faintly like a heartbeat. The silence was heavier than any roar. One of the younger admirals whispered to no one in particular, "We've already lost." The alien commander ordered a forward strike anyway. Because pride dies slower than reason, 30 cruisers moved in, weapons armed. Their energy beams cut through the dark like spears. But the Leviathan didn't dodge. It didn't run. It didn't even raise its shields. The beams hit its hull and vanished like rain against an ocean. The shockwaves rippled outward, hitting the cruisers themselves, knocking several off course. Inside their bridges, alarms screamed. One of the ships cracked down its spine from the rebound. No human ship had fired yet. The second wave fired torpedoes. The missiles reached their target but detonated harmlessly, like their warheads had forgotten how to hurt. The fleet's confidence began to crumble. On the Leviathan's bridge, the crew stood silently at their stations. The captain's voice calm. "Hold fire," she said, her fingers resting on the console like someone controlling the weather. Not a machine. Around her, every light on the ship pulsed in rhythm. Like it was breathing with her, they didn't need to strike first. They wanted the galaxy to feel their size, their patience, their strength. One by one, the alien fleet commanders began to pull their ships back, trying to retreat without admitting they were retreating. But the Leviathan moved forward, not fast, not violent, just forward, and their lines broke like thin ice. In the outer orbit, entire merchant stations switched off their lights, as if trying to hide. Watching this single ship push back the might of 10 star systems, whispers spread through the void faster than any official report ever could. Earth built it. It's bigger than anything. They didn't need allies. They built it alone. Even the oldest empires, the ones that had ruled the stars long before humanity ever left Earth, went quiet as they watched. The Leviathan's shadow stretched across the central corridor, and every fleet it passed through began to turn away before it even had to speak. Then came the moment no one expected. The Council's Grand Armada, the pride of the galaxy, was fully deployed ahead of it. 1,000 warships, dozens of dreadnoughts, defense satellites, and minefields. It was supposed to be their greatest line of defense, their wall, their unbreakable symbol of control. The Leviathan stopped just short of the minefield, silent, its engines low, its pulse steady, and the entire wall began to flicker. Not from any weapon, but from interference. Their systems couldn't stay stable in its presence. One dreadnought lost navigation entirely. A carrier went dark. Commanders screamed over failing comms. Their wall was falling apart before the battle had even begun. A single human transmission cut through the chaos, carried in the same calm voice the galaxy had heard at the beginning. "This is Terra. Stand down." No threat. No countdown. Just a statement. But those words echoed through every fleet channel like a blade sliding against bone. Some commanders shut down their weapons. Others froze. A few tried to stand their ground. None of them fired again. For the first time in history, the galaxy realized it wasn't facing a war they could win with numbers. They were facing something they didn't understand. As the Leviathan continued its slow, unstoppable advance, even the most powerful nations began to whisper what they had refused to admit until now. Earth hadn't just built a warship. They had built a message. A silent, massive, unstoppable message. And that message was being written across the stars without a single shot fired. The council chamber was no longer filled with laughter or pride. It was filled with silence. The kind that only came when power slipped through trembling fingers. Admirals who once mocked Earth now leaned over their trembling holomaps, their faces pale, their hands gripping the edges of their stations as Leviathan's signal flooded every frequency across the stars. The object that was once just a shadow now sat like a black mountain at the center of the most guarded trade hub in the galaxy, surrounded by fleets that no longer dared to fire. Commanders who had spent their lives leading wars couldn't bring themselves to push a single button, because they knew, no matter what they launched, it wouldn't work. On the grand holo display, the Leviathan's hull pulsed slowly, like a heart that controlled the rhythm of the galaxy itself. Its presence had already broken half of their communications network. Its gravity distorted their defense lines. Its silence crushed their pride. Then the voice returned, calm, human, steady. "We asked for peace," it said, echoing through every open channel from the outer colonies to the Council's throne. "You prepared for war. Now you will see what silence has built." Every admiral froze. Every diplomat went still. Those words weren't loud, but they hit harder than any weapon. They carried weight, the weight of years of being underestimated, mocked, pushed aside, used. Humanity hadn't begged for respect. They had prepared for the day they would no longer need to ask. The Leviathan moved closer to the hub, and entire fleets shifted out of its way without being told. Commanders giving silent orders to retreat, not out of strategy, but out of instinct, because they could feel the truth pressing against their skin. This wasn't a battle they could win. Inside the Council's private chamber, the highest leaders argued in whispers, their voices shaking. "We have the numbers," one hissed. "Numbers mean nothing against that," another spat, slamming a fist on the table. "Then we negotiate," someone else said, the word negotiate like a bitter taste on their tongue. A word they had never thought they'd use against Earth. For decades, they had treated humanity as the noisy child at the table, not the one who could break it. Now, as the Leviathan hovered over their most important hub, they realized they weren't dealing with the same Earth they had once known. On the trade station, civilians of 100 species stared through their windows at the silhouette hanging above them. It blotted out half the stars. Drones floated uselessly. Defense cannons sat silent. The station's loudspeaker broadcast one single alert over and over again: "Do not engage." It wasn't from the Council. It was from their own terrified commanders. On the bridge of the Leviathan, everything was quiet. No shouting, no rushing, no noise. Every officer moved with precision, their hands gliding over consoles like they had done it 1,000 times before, because they had. This wasn't chaos. This was a storm planned long ago. The captain stood at the front window, staring at the fleets that once threatened Earth, now scattered like leaves in wind. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply gave the order, "Hold position." The entire ship froze in place, anchored not by force, but by the weight of its presence. The Council sent a message, their voice cracked with fear, disguised as diplomacy. "Human vessel, state your intent," but they already knew the answer before it came. Humanity didn't want their territory, didn't want their throne. They wanted something far more dangerous. They wanted the galaxy to understand they were no longer weak. "We will not bow," the captain's voice replied, clear and controlled. "We will not beg. We will not forget." Around the trade hub, defense lines crumbled without a single shot. Commanders who had sworn they would never surrender began disabling their weapons one by one, because what use was pride against a storm? Admirals began whispering to each other, some begging to stand down, others unable to speak at all, staring at the black silhouette like prey staring at a predator it didn't know existed until now. For the first time in galactic history, the Council realized it wasn't humanity that was surrounded. It was them, surrounded by their arrogance, their underestimation, their fear. Then the sky above the hub shifted. One by one, more shadows appeared in the dark, smaller than the Leviathan, but still larger than anything the Council had built. They slid into formation like blades around a crown. The Council's generals gasped as their tactical displays updated. Multiple warship signatures, all Terran. The Leviathan hadn't come alone. This was not a lone monster. This was a fleet they had never known existed. The captain of the Leviathan gave the final broadcast. "This is Terra," she said, her voice neither threatening nor kind, just steady like steel. "Stand down or be reminded what silence built." No screaming. No bluffs, no drama, just certainty. Across the fleets, weapons powered down like candles in the rain. The hub sat quiet. The council chambers fell still. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy's most powerful rulers were silent. Not because someone took their power away, but because Earth had revealed it never needed theirs. The Leviathan floated in orbit, motionless but dominant, its presence rewriting the unspoken laws of the stars. Humanity had not conquered a single planet, and yet the galaxy had already surrendered in its own heart. The war hadn't even started, but everyone knew how it would end. In silence. On Earth's terms, the galaxy was quiet. The kind of quiet that made every breath feel heavy, every heartbeat sound too loud, across hundreds of systems. Fleets that once saw themselves as the hammer of the stars now drifted like lost ships. Afraid to even move, the Leviathan hung above the trade hub like a black crown, its escorts in perfect formation around it, glowing faint blue under the starlight. Every sensor, every camera, every trembling eye in the galaxy was pointed at one single ship. And yet Earth hadn't fired a single shot. It didn't need to. Its silence spoke louder than any weapon. Every admiral, every diplomat, every council member finally understood that everything they had believed about Earth was wrong. Humanity had never been the weak voice in the room. They had only let the galaxy believe that. While they built their empire in the dark, where no one dared to look, deep inside the council chamber, the great hall that had once echoed with mocking laughter was now heavy with the sound of quiet breathing. Every leader sat frozen, staring at the red dot on the holomap that represented Leviathan, not because of what it was doing, but because of what it had already done without doing anything. It had broken their fleets. It had shattered their confidence. It had exposed how fragile their unity really was. One voice cracked through the silence. "They were never weak," an old strategist whispered. His eyes locked on the display. "We were blind." No one argued with him. No one could. They all knew he was right. Out in orbit, the Leviathan slowly rotated. its armor reflecting a faint golden shimmer from the nearby star, and as it turned, the sky behind it began to change one by one. New shadows emerged from the void, massive warships, each smaller than Leviathan, but still impossibly large, rising from the dark like ghosts answering a call. They slid into formation with flawless precision, surrounding the hub from every direction. Dozens of them, maybe more, and as they took position, it became clear to the galaxy that Leviathan was not Earth's trump card. It was only the beginning. Humanity hadn't built a single monster. They had built an entire fleet in silence. Every communication channel in the galaxy lit up at once. Thousands of voices shouting at each other, panic, disbelief, surrender, fear, all tangled into a storm of noise. But above that noise, a single human signal broke through, calm, steady, unshakable. "We built what you refused to see," the voice said, "because we learned that silence is stronger than noise." The words rolled through every ship, every station, every world, and for the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council fell silent, not out of control, but out of submission. Their fleets lowered their weapons. Their commanders stopped shouting orders. Their empires stopped pretending they were the strongest in the room. On the Leviathan's bridge, the captain stood with her hands behind her back, watching the stars through the wide glass. Her crew silent but steady. No one celebrated, no one cheered, because this was never about glory. It was about making sure Earth would never again be dismissed. Never again be mocked, never again be cornered. "All ships hold," she said softly. And across the massive Terran fleet, a ripple of lights blinked in perfect unison, like the heartbeat of something vast and ancient. Humanity had not conquered a world, but it had taken the galaxy's breath away. On distant colonies, children of alien worlds stood at their windows, staring at the sky, their parents whispering stories about humans who once begged for a seat at the table, now watching as the same humans hovered above the Council's most powerful hub like silent gods. On Earth, millions gathered before global broadcasts, their faces lit by the glow of the fleet they had built in secret for generations. Knowing the galaxy was finally seeing what Earth had always known, it was never weak, it was patient. It was dangerous. The Council finally sent a transmission, their voice low, careful, almost humble. "What do you want?" They asked because power like that doesn't beg, it decides. The captain's reply came like stone, simple and clear. Respect. No conquest. No demands for planets or tribute. Just one word that weighed more than an entire fleet. Respect for the race they had dismissed for centuries. Respect for the power they had pretended didn't exist. Respect for the silence that built Leviathan. And so it ended not with fire, not with a war, not with broken worlds, but with silence. A silence so vast and heavy that the galaxy would remember it for centuries. A silence that forced every empire to rethink everything it thought it knew about power. Leviathan floated in orbit, a dark guardian of a planet no one dared to underestimate anymore. Earth had not spoken loudly, but it had spoken clearly, and every star had listened. From that day on, the galaxy learned a simple truth. The loudest empire isn't always the strongest stone. Sometimes the strongest is the one that builds in the dark, waits, and when the time comes, rises like a storm.